good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you may be dialing in for this. I am Grace Francisco, and I am the VP of Developer Relations and Education at MongoDB. I have been very, very fortunate to have had many years in developer relations land across enterprise, consumer, small business, fintech, and even gaming most recently. So I've had a wealth of experience across DevRel that has been just a massive asset to bring forth in my career. And I hope that I can impart some wisdom to any of you who may be reaching out to me around this. I've also been really fortunate. Last year, Dries, the founder of Drupal, actually reached out to me. It had been probably 10 years since we had last talked, but back in my Microsoft days, I was doing open source initiatives, and that's when I first worked with the Drupal community. And last year, they invited me to participate on their board, on the Drupal Association board. So I'm very honored to be part of that community as well now. Well, it goes without saying that we are experiencing some extremely challenging times today. And I have been thinking a lot about this book, from which my talk title has been inspired from one of my favorite authors, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I read this book many years ago, Love in the Time of Cholera. Did you all know that cholera actually was also a pandemic? It had 7 incidences of that pandemic over the course of 150 years, 7 times. Now, this book is on the surface about this romance, and this couple meets in their late teens, early 20s, and time and space, a marriage, war, cholera separates them. And they don't reunite for 50 years. So they get back together in their 70s. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and shelter in place and the experience that we're having now in this pandemic. And I think about my work in developer relations, and I think about the fact that, wow, I certainly hope it doesn't take us 50 years to be together again and connecting. And I don't know about you guys, but every day, every morning, I wake up and I think, have I woken up yet from this episode of the Twilight Zone? And, of course, the Washington Post puts together this article of 7 very timely episodes that the Twilight Zone had shot many years ago that are so appropriate for this pandemic that we're experiencing right now. But especially so, the first pilot episode where this pilot wakes up and he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he is. And he's walking around in this town that he doesn't know. And there are signs of life, but he doesn't see any human. He never comes across a particular person. So it's like this empty town. And as he goes from place to place and his fear starts to escalate, at some point he says, okay, I need to wake up now. I need to wake up now. I need to wake up now. I can certainly relate to that phrase right now. And then at some point, he's not waking up, so he runs into the town square and he starts screaming, where is everybody? I think about that too. Where is everybody? What a crazy time we're in right now, right? And certainly in the age that we're in right now, the virus has had significant impact on how we internet. So stats in terms of traffic for social sites like Facebook, not surprisingly, has gone up as we all are just so eager to stay connected with our networks. And then, not surprisingly as well, entertainment sites have gone up as some of us are really eager to forget, at least momentarily, what we're experiencing right now. And then on the flip side of things, mobile app usage has gone down quite a bit because we're sheltered in place. We're not on the go. And really, when we're trying to connect, we want the bigger screen, not the little screen that we use when we're running around town. And on top of this, people are consuming news on every news outlet possible, trying to get minute-by-minute updates on what the heck is going on with this virus. Where is everybody? Is everybody okay? Right? I think that a lot of people who weren't even consuming news before are probably consuming news every few minutes just to understand what is going on with this pandemic. And I'll tell you where everybody is. Everybody's here in Muppet Land on Zoom. This is what we're experiencing now to try to stay connected, whether it's socially or whether it's for work. This is the experience that we have to try to connect. And yet, is this really how we want to truly connect? Not really. for some of us, we really want more of this interpersonal connection with Kermie, like more one-on-one. And yet, what is the issue here? The issue is Kermie is looking off onto his screen thinking he's looking at you, but he's not. So his eyes are floating off into a different direction, and so are yours. So you're actually missing the eye-to-eye contact. You're missing the connection. So it feels so exhausting because you're trying to have a conversation, but you can't see eye to eye, literally. And that's frustrating. And as you all know, we are all taxing the heck out of our internet services, which were meant for casual home users who aren't home all day, yet we all are home all day working, taxing our internet services. So as we hiccup through internet space, what happens as we're in our Zooms, some of us end up frozen, like Han Solo from The Empire Strikes Back, frozen in carbonite, and we leave this expression on the screen as we're exiting accidentally out of the middle of a meeting. And God forbid it's a meeting with your boss, because that's the expression you've left him or her. Oh God, even more frustrating and exhausting, all right? And I know that many of you are taking those long walks outside when you can, especially when the weather is nice. And you take these long contemplative walks. I have been taking these long contemplative walks thinking about the meaning of life. How do we connect? How do we belong in this virtualized world where you can literally walk down the street and you're wondering, where are people? Where is everybody? What are people doing? How do I belong in a situation like this? The streets in my area are deserted because people are afraid or are at home and are working from home and sticking to themselves. And then you get home after thinking and contemplating about the meaning of life, how you're going to belong, how you're going to relate. And your furry pets that you keep dragging outside with you are absolutely exhausted. And really, they are reflecting the pure exhaustion we're all feeling right now and trying to connect this really bizarre way, if you think about it. Interestingly, so massive open online courses by academic circles was near death. It was near death until the pandemic hit. And now suddenly it's having this huge revival. They're seeing 7 times the traffic that they were seeing before the pandemic hit. And this is as people are looking for meaning, looking to learn new skills, new programming languages, new disciplines like data science. And interestingly enough, the breakout hit out of all of this is the science of well-being. Because guess what? We're all struggling to stay sane through all this, right? So we're looking for ways to actually manage the anxiety and stress that we're all feeling and not being able to actually interpersonally connect anymore in that way that we're used to. Now, Evans data had forecasted that we would be close to 24 million developers by the end of last year. And in 2024, India would outpace the growth of developers in the United States. Now, given all this online learning, people are potentially doing some career switching, given that being software developers and technologists, we have such a great benefit of being able to take our work home. I'm sure there are quite a few other people who want to be able to do that, who have more traditional roles. So this can have a significant change in terms of forecast over the next few years as this pandemic sticks around for a while. Massive, massive online shifts, as you all know. All these, the biggest developer conferences in the world have either been canceled or delayed, completely virtualized. And, you know, it has been disappointing for many of us, right? Because this is at the heart and core for what we often do in developer relations, right? Being showcased on stage, speaking, going to events, meeting people, connecting, relating, right? And my famous picture of the fish, some of you have seen me speak before. I show this picture a lot because I talk to my team a lot about scaling, right? Because those 24 million developers, you can't possibly meet them all in person. So you got to be thinking about how you scale everything you do online. So whether it's creating a developer hub, making sure all of your technical evergreen content is in one place for other developers to understand how your technology connects to other things in the software industry, how your technologies really can help solve real world problems. So whether it's a developer hub, your online forums and communities, The team has also been experimenting with Twitch, and so that's been a great platform for the team to use because it supports gaming. And gaming, you got to be thinking about scaling all the time. So that's been a huge platform for us to connect with developers, along with YouTube, of course, and we're even experimenting with TikTok. So the team was already leaning into this online component. So while we were really disappointed that we couldn't make it to in-person conferences this season, we were already leaning into the online scale component because it really is always about scaling, scaling, and scaling. Now, to be honest, be truly honest, we all miss this. Being on a plane, knowing that we're about to go to that next event and meet a bunch of developers in person to see eye to eye, to have that conversation, right? And really, nothing replaces this experience, being on stage, seeing the energy and the excitement of the audience, really connecting at scale with a large audience in the room. Nothing really replaces this online, right? Because you just can't have that experience, that Muppet Land Zoom experience. And I think about this question very often. This is a question that a open source developer asked me many, many years ago. I was speaking at an open source conference, and he came up to me randomly and looked at me in the eye and said, "So, are you relating yet?" And I thought, why is he asking me this question? Oh, part of my title is Developer Relations. Am I relating yet? And I ask myself this question a lot right now about how we're relating as a team to developers that we're so used to going and seeing and talking with in person. And it's a really difficult thing to do right now, and there isn't a silver bullet. So we are actually learning as we go. Because really, if this is how we are connecting, this is as close as we're going to get, we really have to think about how we're going to offer that sense of belonging, that sense of connection. For some of us, belonging really means going back to the things that have real meaning to us, like saving the oceans, and really leaning into that and contributing to projects that help those causes that are still in great need in the world. And for some, it really means being part of the fight against COVID-19 and creating net new solutions that help in that cause. As an example of that, we had some employee volunteers from MongoDB, Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple come together to build this crowdsourced application to help understand how this virus is moving around the United States. And this is built on a very short order and is available, and it was done in partnership with Boston Children's Hospital along with Harvard Medical Research. For some, it's really about leaning into and helping those communities that need that help the most. So in the case of Drupal, the Drupal Association really depends a lot on those in-person events, and when the conferences had to be canceled because of COVID-19, the organization was struggling, so they had to run this campaign to seek help from the community to keep going. And in very short order, in 60 days, they were able to raise $500,000 from 2,000 individuals and 150 businesses. And this is really important because the Drupal Association is really at the heart and core of what keeps that community going. And it's important also because they actually have people in the front lines who depend on Drupal. And so that needs to continue in order to support these organizations. Now, our biggest developer event, and where we really want our community to feel that belonging, is MongoDB World. And that also had to be shifted to a virtual format. And we were really sad about that, but safety first. And so we shifted very quickly into this virtual format. And this is how we decided to lean into it. And that is, we recognized, hey, this is what it is right now to connect. Our speakers for the keynote were all on the Zoom-like screen, right? Because we were really reflecting what the experience of today is really all about. And on top of that, you all know your furry pets, your kids, your partners all end up in the background of your meetings. And so why not also enlist the help of one of the children of our keynote speakers to close out the keynote? That is part of our daily lives and situations today. And in addition to that, we actually use the platform, our virtual platform, to raise awareness of the social injustices that happen to Black Americans day after day after day here in the US. So we helped to raise awareness of the issues as well as to raise funds with these organizations. Now, the most creative things actually happen organically with the community. And this was one where a community member in this DevOps community, they were about to cancel their conference. And one of them said, hey, look, I was able to model this booth, this trade show booth in my favorite gaming platform, Animal Crossings. It was kind of like put out there as a, hey, fun kind of snapshot. And then someone said, hey, we should actually do that. And what a smart group of people, right? Gaming has to scale, and it always has had to scale. Unlike other platforms that are only now trying to think about how they're going to scale to accommodate thousands and thousands of attendees for conferences, gaming platforms are actually really appropriate for that. So good on them. In fact, one of our developer advocates participated in this single track conference. They had over 8,500 unique viewers for the single track conference. They had a presentation. They also streamed on Twitch. She wore MongoDB swag, as you can see on the cap, and they had an actual audience in their avatar form engaging with the speakers. And it wouldn't be a real conference unless you actually had swag to give out. And so Adrienne also created MongoDB swag she could share with the other attendees. Now, back to Han Solo here for a second. Frozen in carbonite, just frozen. I feel that experience of feeling like I'm frozen, waiting and waiting and waiting for things to go back to normal. But the reality is we're not going back to that normal anytime soon. In fact, that's reinforced as of news a couple of days ago with really large tech companies. I'm talking about 80,000 people. 80,000 people is a massive company to be announcing that they are also rolling out permanent work from home plans given this long-lasting pandemic that they expect. And this is, of course, on top of Twitter and all these other companies, Square, announcing permanent work from home plans for their organizations even earlier than this. So how do we belong when this is how far apart we really are right now? We can be together virtually. It's not the same. You can be together. And in fact, we are so fortunate as developers and technologists to be able to work from home. That's not the case for so many other workers that are out there today. And so I encourage you to look at this opportunity to really think about how you can lean into those skill sets and code for good and contribute in some way to those causes that really matter to you. Whether it's really leaning in this battle against COVID-19 and helping to find solutions, or to battle these social injustices that our Black Americans face day after day after day. Or continuing to support those communities that you have been in that still need you, like Drupal. And so I say to you now, if you're done with just learning and consuming all the content on those MOOC sites, if you're done binge watching, because many of you are binge watching all the things on Netflix or Amazon Prime. And if you're done taking your furry pets out and taking those multiple contemplative walks a day, not done, because exercise is actually good for you. Are you relating to this yet? Does this mean something to you now? I hope it does. Belonging is an innate need that we all have, and we can still do this even while we're far apart. Together, we can really have meaningful impact still in this world. So while these are difficult conditions that we're all going through together as technologists and developers, we can have massive, massive impact. So you ask yourself, where is everybody? Where is everybody? Everybody's still here. We're still here. There's still great needs. There's still a lot of hurting in the world. There's still a lot of chaos in the world. And you as technologists and developers have unique skills to bring to bear here to help solve some of these problems. So find that thing that you want to belong to be with that community you've been with or join a new one, because the world really needs us more than ever now. And with that, I say thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Grace. Really appreciate that. It's a great way to close out today. So yeah, reminder to people to ask your questions on our Slack channel. So I'll start a few of mine. So I really appreciate how you've connected the need to give back, often in technological ways, but I like how you connected it to belonging. So I wanted to sort of dig deeper with each of these examples that you talked about. So first of all, maybe one, I don't know if there's an answer, but just funding, right? So there are ways to use, as I mentioned in our opening, like we as a community in DevRel and community builders, we're diverse. We've got different interests. April was talking last week about how we're passionate about a lot of different things. So how can we use our knowledge, our skill set, our network, and all that to help a lot of people beyond just our customers that we do. So I love that you address this. So let's start with one. So you talked about different examples of people raising money and fundraising. So can you add a little bit more? I like that there was an open source component for the Drupal one, and then there could be other ways. Are there more details that we can go into there, and how like we leverage our outreach, or how we be creative on how we collect that money?
So I think at the heart of it, you have to pick that passion that's most important to you. So that first example that I put up was not actually funding as much as coding for good, which was to save our ocean waters. And so whether it's time or money, you got to get a couple of people who really are passionate and really believe in it to really rally everyone else. And, in dev relations, we all have a bunch of connections, right? So it doesn't take much of a spark. If you get a couple of people like really into something and really believing that is the right next thing to do, it's so easy for all of us in DevRel to connect the dots to the right people, whether it's technologists or people who can help with funding, or connecting to other people who can help with funding and sponsorship. I think we are uniquely positioned to really get those kinds of things really rolling and moving pretty rapidly.
Yeah. Okay, so then going to that second thing about actually committing time into building a technology, could you share more about your example where it was Mongo and AWS and others that helped the hospitals? Could you share more detail on that project? And you mentioned the word volunteer, so I wanted to dig into that as well, like, because I assume this is your employees' time. So
those were employees that got together across MongoDB, Apple, Amazon, and Alphabet, and they got together around like trying to figure out how do we help in this situation. And it was literally, this was not a company asked, it was employees who got together and said, hey, we've got to do something here in identifying how this virus is moving around the United States, crowdsourcing that information as much as possible. What they did was they actually took an existing app, which was to help report flu incidences. And in a week, they rebuilt it specifically so that they could track coronavirus as it was spreading throughout the United States. And so that for them, they, in collaboration with the Boston Children's Hospital, as well as Harvard Medical Research, that's how that came about, is just the right people connecting together and the right technologists being involved to get it done so rapidly. A week is amazing to turn that around.
Yeah, yeah. So that leads me to a question. What are ways that we as companies, we as people leading developer relations teams, how can we incorporate that into our own metrics so that it's not individuals volunteering their time, but like, how can they come back and say, I want my company to be behind this. How can we make it officially part of our OKRs and then fit it into both our philosophy and our values, but also perhaps metrics that other people don't think we're wasting company time?
Sure. And I think that, from a technology point of view, so much of that technology that we have at our fingertips, so in our case, MongoDB Atlas, which is our cloud offering, we are able to provide credits to a lot of startups that wanted to solve this problem around coronavirus, whether it's tracking or, doing something else around creating an application for helping in the battle of COVID-19, they were given Atlas credits. So that helps us in developer relations and other groups at MongoDB because we care about adoption of the technology, but we were also able to use it for good, and being able to enable that COVID-19 tracker with Boston Children's Hospital as well as Harvard Medical. With those employee volunteers involved, we were able to donate that Atlas usage, right, for them.
Mm-hmm. And have you made plans for the future, like made it part of your directive and research, like these are other things, that areas where maybe we can help, and that we'll actually incorporate it as part of our plans? Is that something you guys talked about at all?
We honestly, we haven't. I think that to some degree, many organizations in general are still just in this mode of trying to settle, but every week it feels like something else explodes in the world, and so things have felt like it's been on fire. So I think that if things had settled, we probably could have come up with something planful by now. But between COVID-19 and all the other issues that are happening, and the riots and everything around us, especially in the U.S. being on fire, I think it's been very difficult to put a strategy around that in place. I think there is going to be an ongoing need. This pandemic is not a short-term thing, very clearly. So I think we all need to be thinking about how do we lean into this experience, still do our work as developer relations professionals, driving adoption of our technologies, but also doing something good along the way. I think, as connectors, there's okay, so maybe I can do Atlas and maybe connect with someone at Google or with Microsoft or whatever the other tech company, and say, hey, how do we get together and do something even bigger to have a bigger impact around, whether it's the social injustices or COVID-19 or the oceans, saving the oceans, because, all those things that were broken before are still broken, and ever so more broken because they're not getting the attention that they need anymore, right? So all those things are still there, just like the Drupal community still needs a community and a heart and core to that community in order to thrive and in order to continue supporting those people who are in the front lines of COVID-19 right now.
Yeah, I certainly hope it won't be 50 years until we can go hang out together. Yeah. So actually, on that note, I wanted to share, I know it's a little bit different from what you talked about, but how have you shifted? I mean, I know you already build on online communities, but how have you maybe doubled down on that, given that now funding that might have gone to sponsor an expensive conference and all the airfare and hotels? Like, how have you thought about your team and how, okay, well, now we have these funds, and now we have different ways of spending our time. How can we use that to also reach to communities that maybe we couldn't reach out to before, and help them and educate them? And like thinking about the previous talk with Rosie and Sue, and like education first, right? Offering first. Have you guys shifted gears in any way for that?
So one area that we had to shift gears, we were just about to completely re-platform and reboot our meetup program, which had been slowly declining over the course of 3 years. So just as we were about to launch that, suddenly it was pandemic, shelter in place. And we thought, oh, okay, what are we gonna do with these meetups? And so the team rapidly came up with a plan to say, okay, we still need to have like local presence and people in their local communities connecting, even if they're not seeing each other in person. There are people in France, there are people in Germany, there are people in India and in Australia and different parts of the US who want to have those meaningful connections more regionally. And so we decided to start kicking off virtual meetups. So while the idea was to have those in-person live meetups, we will get there eventually. We want to start seeding that now and making sure that they have a place to actually connect and find each other on a more regional basis. Now, I think the learning as we started rolling that out was, I think for some part of it, it was somewhat regional, but then I'm sure they had people from outside the region also just looking to connect, and being able to be flexible and accommodate those needs, I think, are important. And like I said in my talk, there's no silver bullet to anything we're doing. None of us have had this kind of crisis before. And, I just feel often that you wake up and you're in this bizarre episode of the Twilight Zone, which is a recurring thing for me when I wake up, and I think, well, okay, so what is that Twilight Zone solution to how we belong and connect right now? And I think that those are things that we have to, use our agile mindsets, right? And be flexible, and also just being willing to embrace the change for what it is. As human beings, we are so we have so much angst around any kind of change. Certainly this is such significant change for any single person. It's hard to digest. And so as much as we can break those down into digestible bits of embracing the change, whether it's, okay, well, we're not going to be in person for a while, meetups, what can we do with this that's productive? I think is an important mindset, is being flexible, breaking things down so that it's not this overwhelming, oh my God, this pandemic is ruining everything kind of mindset. It's a, okay, pandemic is really throwing, us, quite the curveball here. How do we adjust to this brand new world that we're operating in?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you could also look at it as half glass full. We're not traveling as much, which means we have more time to write and develop content and sample code and all sorts of other things that often go to the wayside for especially the folks in the DevRel team who are more outbound facing. So we've had the great opportunity for people to really lean into the online component.
Yeah, actually, that brings up a great topic that we've been talking about through our CFB process. How have you shifted your team? I don't know how big your team is, but some people, what I love about having DevRel teams is that there's always something to do. There are always different areas of focus that need to get covered. So having a really diverse team with different areas of interest and strengths and weaknesses and all that, like you have easy ways to like fill in all the gaps that need to get filled. But then suddenly now maybe some people just don't like writing blog posts. They got into this because they love the travel and the speaking and the engaging and just hacking with people. So how have you worked that out for some of the people that maybe it's more challenging, where you're like, hey, now you have all this time to do content, but that's not my strength. Like, how have you dealt with that?
So, I think we're fortunate that there are still virtual conferences. So folks who tend to like to present more are adjusting to this kind of new format that we're all living in right now with virtual conferences. I think as well, for us to keep our skills fresh, even those folks who like to travel and be outbound, you have to do some level of coding as well. And a good chunk of the team is relatively new. So we've got people who are still sort of onboarding and learning that depth and breadth of the different offerings across MongoDB and MongoDB Atlas. And we also have our mobile component, which is Realm. We're hiring, by the way, a couple of mobile dev advocates. If anyone's looking, has either iOS or Android experience, we're looking for a couple of great dev advocates to join us. And since it's global scale, you could be almost anywhere. So yeah, it's been an adjustment for everyone across the board. I moved to be closer to the New York office, and I really miss that vibe of being in the office, being with everyone else, because that point I made about, Kermit, like when you're looking on the screen, you're often not actually seeing eye to eye because you're looking at your webcam, but you're not looking at the person. If you don't look at the webcam, that person's not going to experience you looking at them.
Yeah.
For that there's a human component there that is so hard to adjust to, that you really want to be able to see that eye-to-eye motion and feel like you've connected in a really genuine way. I think that is probably the hardest thing that we have to do as developer relations professionals, right?
Yeah. I've gotten so used to now the meeting where I'm talking to the person who's talking like this. Yeah, because their screen with my face is over here. And I've adjusted. I was like, okay, this is how this works. Well, thank you so much. I'll share one last thing. You mentioned the Twilight Zone. My friend keeps saying, if people know The Good Place, because I keep thinking I'm in the I've finally woken up and I realize I'm in the bad place. I'm not in the good place. She says it like every couple of days, because this is how we have to figure out what the new normal is going to be. So thanks so much. I'll close it out with a reminder to you and a reminder to our attendees. So we have a Slack channel with a jobs channel in it. So definitely, if you have any jobs, please post it there. And if anybody's looking, feel free to post a link to your LinkedIn or some people to the GitHubs or a little note about yourself. So it's something we've always done at the in-person DevRelCon San Francisco's, where we had a whiteboard with people, drawing all kinds of stuff or leaving their cards and such. So this is the virtual version. So it's been kind of cool to see the different kinds of roles that are posting. So yes, if you are hiring, definitely make sure to post it there. So thank you so much, Grace. I really appreciate your closing out this keynote.
Thank you.